You are listening to the Big Scuba. This is an audio-only episode.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And lift off.
Hello, this is NASA Astronaut Mike Fincke. Welcome to the Big Scuba Podcast. I am here with Gemma, Ian, and Honey to talk about scuba, spaceflight, and answer all of your questions. We won't launch a rocket, but we'll launch the podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Big Scuba Podcast. This is a bit of a special episode for us because it's not every day you get to talk to an astronaut from NASA. So there we are. And also, it's also a bit special because we've got Scuba Honey here with us, who's going to be joining us firing some questions. And Honey is representing not just my daughter, but St Edmund's Catholic Primary School from England. There we go.
Child helpful.
So, hello to everybody who's watching. So, it's really good. We've had to go through quite a few legal checks and things like that to get this far. So,
It took a while, but we were there.
we're there.
We're ready.
Ready to go. And also, thank you very much to our lovely patrons who every month dip into their pocket to help support and make this possible. And we've got a question coming up from John, who's going to be representing those patrons. So thank you very much.
Yeah, that's great.
And also, we've got a big thank you to our great friend of the podcast, Christina Sonato. So there'll be lots of links where you can find more details about Christina and People of the Water. So really great non-profit organisation who always need support. And we thought it'd be really great to marry this episode up with NASA and People of the Water. And also under the hashtags of explore, educate and conservation, we took this opportunity to marry things up with our local school, with St Edmund's School. And that's why Honey's going to be firing some questions at Michael, because the school have put together some questions to ask.
Yeah, so you're going to have your first interview.
Yeah, how good is that?
Yes.
So that's that. So I think they're the thank yous. But also, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do. There'll be a subscribe button in the middle here somewhere, just floating above Honey's head. Okay.
Boink.
If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And it's always really great to have some support. Gemma, anything else to add?
No, I think that's everything. So we've got NASA on the line, ready and waiting in the control room.
So Mike, exceptional guy. He's done loads, done 9 spacewalks, flown the Endeavour space shuttle on SDS-134, spent just over a year in space, and he's actually training and getting ready to fly the Boeing Starliner, which is their new spaceship. So we should be going out
Next year.
early next year. So,
He's a real life breathing astronaut, been on 9 spacewalks, and he's about to go up again.
Ex-military pilot and also an engineer. So fluent in Japanese and Russian. How about that? So that's pretty good going. Anyway, enough of us running on. Let's have a countdown. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello,
Good morning,
hi.
good morning.
All right.
Or good afternoon, I should say.
Okay. So, Mike, you're a PADI Open Water Diver like Gemma and myself. And did your PADI qualifications help you become an astronaut?
So I got my PADI certification before I became an astronaut, and I think it helped me in several ways, and I think it was a favorable thing on my astronaut application. Of course, NASA, we look at a lot of different things, but the fact that I could, put on gear and go into a strange environment, we're not really supposed to breathe underwater, Ian. I mean, it's not natural, but having being able to overcome, the innate fear and to be able to wear your regulator and dive and go and forget that you're in a place where humans did not evolve, and to enjoy it and to be functional is a very, very good skill, because it's very similar to being in space. We're not supposed to be there necessarily, but we are, and we do really well in space because most humans are very adaptable. And it takes special people to be scuba, and it turns out just about everybody is special in terms of being able to do scuba. They just have to get over it. So for me, I think my PADI qualification helped me to become an astronaut, and what it meant. It showed that I could do different things with different gear. And there's a lot of things that we learn just in the basic PADI course that really translate well for spaceflight, all the way from you should take good care of your equipment because it takes care of you. Those kind of things that you learn when you're diving are really applicable to spaceflight, and that's why NASA has special relationships. We all feel that we're great scuba divers.
Yeah, that's great. So NASA's Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory, the NBL, tell us about it. How deep is it? Is it heated? What's in it? And why do you train underwater?
Yes, so it turns out that we at NASA do not have a special room where we can push a button and become weightless. And yet when we're in space, and a lot of us, we stay up there for 6 months, like Tim Peake, right? He was up there for about 6 months on his mission. And we don't know how to be weightless. So especially when we're doing important things like constructing a space station or fixing a Hubble Space Telescope. So we have to have a place where we can practice, and doing it underwater is very similar to being in space. Being neutrally buoyant, as everybody who's ever had an opportunity to be scuba know that maintaining your buoyancy is a really important thing. But being neutrally buoyant underwater is very similar, and the skills that we learn by practicing our spacewalks underwater translate and help us to build things like the space station. In fact, the International Space Station, we went through and we had no injuries, no fatalities, anything like that. When we were looking at building it in the late 1980s and early 1990s, we thought that it was going to be really dangerous, and it is. But we were, because we had such a good neutral buoyancy laboratory. It's heated. It's huge. It's a huge, huge swimming pool. It's a diving tank. It's about 62 meters, about 200 feet long, 100 feet wide, 31 meters, and it's about 40 feet deep, 12.34 meters. It holds 23.5 million liters of water, which is 6.2 million gallons. It's fresh water. I wouldn't taste it, or I wouldn't sample it, but it's and it's heated. In fact, I think that was the biggest difference I knew on I did 9 spacewalks, and my very first spacewalk, I'm outside of the International Space Station hanging on, and I'm saying, wow, this is just like the NBL, because the way that we make the space station look underwater. Oh, by the way, the space station is so big, it doesn't even fit into one of the world's largest swimming pools. I mean, we have to take it in little pieces and move it around a little bit just so that we can get our spacewalks practice. I'm on the outside of the space station, hanging on, 250 miles up, looking down, saying, well, what a long drop that would be. But I was feeling this is just like being at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. And so it was very similar. But one of the things that's different is when you're in space, you're going around the Earth. We go around every 90 minutes. It's hot. It's in the light parts, it's very hot. It gets up to about 300 or 400 degrees, and at that point you say, is that Celsius or is that Fahrenheit? And it's like, I don't care. It's really hot. And then it gets really cold, and like to negative 200. Same thing. I don't know. Centigrade Celsius. Nice. It's still wicked cold. But in the NBL, it's always the same temperature. So that was the biggest difference in the reality. It wasn't the buoyancy, it wasn't the spacewalk choreography. It was just it got hot and cold. And sometimes we like to really make our simulations very realistic, but I would not advise them to make the NBL that hot or that cold.
So then the spacesuits, they have to really contend with the extreme hot and extreme cold, within a short period, I suppose.
Yes, Ian, that's what makes making spacesuits very tricky. And we have a lot of very similar equipment inside, like regulators and pressure regulators, and we don't quite have scuba tanks, but we have a big tank of we breathe pure oxygen, but it's not that much difference in some respects as a scuba suit or a dry suit, except that it has to be able to handle the vacuum of space. It needs to be pressurized inside and outside, and it has to handle the pressures. We also have some embedded Kevlar and other things so that little micrometeoroids, if they hit us, we got armor. So that makes our gear about 300 pounds. It's quite heavy.
Wow, that's heavy, isn't it? So when you started your training underwater, did they start you off in a scuba dry suit or a wetsuit, or were you straight into the suits when you first started underwater in the laboratory?
Yes. So our sequence of events, and again, another reason why scuba is important to space flight, is that we start out with, when you start out with scuba, the first thing they make you do is what? The swim test. Yes, we had to do a swim test too. And at that time,
swim test.
I'm sorry?
200-meter swim test.
Yes. And we also had a few other things where we had to practice, practice treading water and things like that. And at that time in my life, I was less buoyant. More muscle and less fat, so I was the only one in the swim test. They couldn't see my eyes were just barely above the water, and my hands were above the water. So I'm glad I don't have to take the swim test very often. So after the swim test, they helped us get scuba certified for those astronauts who were selected who hadn't been certified already. And then we practiced spacewalking in scuba gear, and then we moved on to the suits. Now, we didn't do dry suits. In fact, the NBL is quite comfortable, so it was more like in a t-shirt and swim trunks, and then the standard scuba gear. We do at the NBL use nitrox, which is slightly enhanced breathing gas that has a little bit more oxygen in it, and that allows us to have a little bit more underwater time if we need to.
Yeah. So how did it feel when you first went into the NBL with the spacesuit on? Was it?
It was pretty amazing, because and the funny thing is that what I really like about scuba is that you're your own person. In other words, you put your own gear on. Of course, you go with a buddy. You always check your buddy checks you. But you have some mobility. But when you're in a spacesuit, it's a very expensive, heavy piece of gear, and you can't move by yourself. So in fact, when we practice our spacewalks underwater, we don't move at all. We have people that move us to the space station. So we have divers. Yes, so for each crew member underwater, we have at least 3, sometimes 4 divers that are there to help us out. One that has a safety camera.
They're the guys who've seen with twin sets on.
Yes.
Yeah, and they actually, because if your suit weighs obviously quite heavy, to move you, that can't be particularly easy.
No, it isn't. But once you get in the water, and we call it a way out, but they make us neutrally buoyant. They can actually swim us along and bring us along. Once we get on structure, like we do in space, we actually do our spacewalk, which is a movement of hand over hand across the space station. And of course, we have tethers that keep us to this space station. So if we were to let go, we won't disappear into the darkness of space.
Okay, cool.
You need to equalize when you have a spacesuit on? When you're in the
I'm sorry?
To equalize when you have a spacesuit on?
Yes. So we do need to equalize a little bit when we in the NBL. In the real spacesuit going out, it's actually almost the opposite. When you're scuba diving or practicing spacewalks, you're getting into higher and higher pressure as you go down the water column, and you need to equalize. We have inside of our helmet, they have a small little sponge. They give it a special acronym like Valsalva device or DSD or something like that, and you can put your nose and we equalize, because you can't grab because you're in a helmet. It doesn't work very well. So we have a small equalization device inside of our spacesuit. On the real day, it's actually almost the opposite, because we're going from a pressurized environment to a less pressurized environment. So when we go out for a spacewalk, it's actually like ascending after a dive, and when we come back in, it's like getting pressurized, like descending, so that we can come back from 0 0 pressure to 1 atmospheric pressure. So it's a little bit opposite. We do worry about in spacewalks. We do worry about getting the bends, right? Decompression sickness. So all the things that we learn in the basic scuba courses. I think, Gemma, you're going through it right now. It's really, we learn the same thing at NASA and in the space program. It's very applicable.
That's great.
And do those suits, do they leak? Do you ever find sometimes you get like with our dry suits, sometimes you get back after you're like, your wrist is damp, or, do you ever get a leak in your suit?
Oh, the beauty of it, Ian, is that these are pressurized suits, so we are more pressure inside than outside.
Oh, right.
So the leaks that we worry about are not water coming in, which is theoretically possible but highly unlikely. But we're more worried about our air going out. So we have joints like our shoulder joints or our waist joint below us, or even our glove joints. And if they are not put on right, or if there's even something as thin as a hair on the joint, it will actually we see little bubbles leak out. And sometimes we have to, after going all the way down, 40 feet to the bottom, we have to go all the way back up, take off our glove and redo it, and then come back all the way down. And for us, it's just takes time. But the divers, that's a lot of up and down and equalization. But we work with professionals.
So when you're in the MBL, how long are you underwater? Does it vary, or what's the longest?
Yes, so they keep us underwater for 6 hours, and real spacewalks can last a little bit longer. But for 6 hours, it's actually 3 shifts of divers. Each of our divers can only go under in diving tables, right? They can only stay under for about 2 hours. So 6 hours is 3 shifts.
And you've been, we want to talk a bit about the Nemo project you've been involved in 2002. Nemo II, the NASA Extreme Environmental Mission operation in Florida Keys, utilizing the Aquarius habitat. Can you tell us a bit about the Nemo II project?
Yes, 20,000 millimeters under the sea. So the Aquarius habitat belongs to a different agency. So I'm with NASA, the American National Aeronautics and Space Administration. We also have a National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, NOAA, and they own and operate a undersea habitat. It looks a lot like a space station module. It's a lot more beefy because it has to handle the pressure from the depths. And it's about 60 feet underwater, about 20 meters or 20,000 millimeters. And it's fantastic because you can, once you stay under, you can stay saturated. So you can actually, and you stay at that pretty much that depth the whole time. And that means you can stay, as long as you can find food and air, which the habitat has, you can stay underwater for weeks at a time. Our mission, we stayed for about 1 week, somewhere between about 6 days underwater. And that meant that each day we could go outside and scuba for 4, 5, or 6 hours. So can you imagine every day scuba diving for 6 or 7 hours, not having to worry about the dive tables too much, things like that, because you stayed under the whole time.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. The facilities were, in other words, the toilet was outside. So if you had to get up in the middle of the night and take care of business, you actually had to put on your wetsuit and go outside, and it was quite interesting. Different than space, because space doesn't have any fish floating around, but underwater there certainly was quite a few, a lot of wildlife, and it was just absolutely amazing to be underwater, to get that much scuba time, and yet at every moment it was an extreme environment. If we decided to just because we were so saturated, it means the nitrogen bubbles were not in our bloodstream anymore. If we decided to just jump up and go to the surface, it would have killed us with decompression sickness.
Yeah.
It would have been a surety. So we had to be very careful. Even though we were only 60 feet down, it was very dangerous to go to the surface. So these kind of things are, great training for astronauts who are going into space. It's a lot less. It's a lot less cost for us, because this cost to go to space is still quite expensive. So living underwater and scuba diving is a great economical alternative for space training. So next time you're out scuba diving, friends out there, just remember that you're practically in space.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
true. Yeah.
So Jacques Cousteau did a similar thing in 1966 on the Conshelf 3 project. So do you find yourself thinking about that when you're...
We did, and the fact that Jacques Cousteau and his team that helped with this aqualung concept, right, which we call scuba, self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, right? Would you, if we stayed with aqualung, would you have kept your name to the Big Aqualung podcast, or would it have been the Big Scuba Project? And anyway, so yes, we did think about Jacques Cousteau and his voyages of exploration. We turns out, and when we were underwater, we were just absolutely fascinated because we were always, as astronauts, we always have our eyes up to the sky. But it turns out that I think we know certain parts of Mars and certainly the moon much better than we know our own oceans. And Jacques Cousteau helped us recognize and learn more about the world that we live in.
Oh, that's brilliant. So did living underwater, did that sort of help with your time in space? Do you find that, you know, when you're underwater for like 6 days, wasn't it? You know, you find that really helped with the whole mindset of going to be away in space?
Yes, we lived. There were 6 of us in one module, the Aquarius habitat, and it was very similar to living aboard the space station. Space station, actually, we have 6 people, but we have about 8 or 9 modules, so it's a lot. A lot more room, but we still, the same things apply. You have to live with other people. You can't just leave your clothes lying around. You have to eat at a certain time. Sometimes you like the food, sometimes you don't. All these little things that add up to living and working in an extreme environment. We did it underwater, and it was so similar in space. And I hadn't flown in space yet, and I did remember, you know, on my first space mission, especially saying, "Wow, this Nemo helps out very much." So we were the first operational mission, meaning that in the early 2000s, NASA was saying, "Is this Nemo thing? It could work. Could it not work?" We're up to, I think, Nemo 23 or 24 now. So every year or 2, we do another exploration, send another team down, and we've evolved to practicing living on lunar habitats because we can actually put the weights on people so that it makes them feel like they're actually on the moon in terms of the lunar gravity. There's so many things that you can do underwater, and this is why scuba is so important.
Yeah.
So with you going on your scuba journey, you have ultimately ended up in space. Are your children kind of keen to take up scuba, or are they?
Yes, I have 3 children, and my oldest is 19 and my youngest is 12, and they're all in the scouting program. And the scouting programs offer the ability to get scuba trained. And I think since I became since I got certified, PADI offers, I guess, a recreational level where it's just several hours to get introduced. And I think I'll do that with my younger ones. My older one already has his dive certificate, and I was very happy that he went to do it. And it wasn't so that he would be a future astronaut. I don't think that's where his path will go. But you learn so much about how to handle yourself in a strange environment, and I think this is something all people should know. And it's and again, paying attention to your equipment and being operationally oriented, and then also getting to explore our own planet and seeing some amazing things that you will never see on if you just stay in your own garden the whole time. And he got his certification in California, where they have these huge kelp forests. And he came back so excited. "Dad, did you know there's these big things and they're called kelp?" And then it's like, "Of course, son, I know these things, but I'm glad you know them now too."
Yeah, you just can't convey it until you see it. It's just magical. Yeah. Right, Bungie has got a primary school called St Edmund's Catholic Primary School. Honey's in year 6, and they put together some questions that Honey is going to ask you.
Hello again, honey.
The first one is, how and where do you go to the toilet?
Yes, in space, I think we are a little bit more careful about than we were in the Aquarius habitat. So we didn't do it outside. So in space, we actually have special space toilets. And most Western countries, such as the UK and United States and Canada and in Europe, you have a toilet, right, and a potty, and it has water in it and gravity, right? The gravity helps. So you can deposit whatever you want into the water. You hit the flush and it goes away. And in space, it doesn't work that way. Water is very expensive. Each liter that we take costs, oh, I don't know, about 7,000 pounds, $10,000. So we're very careful about our water. So we actually have a special space toilet. It doesn't have gravity, so we have a vacuum suction. So it's like we turn on a little motor before we go, and it makes a noise just like a vacuum cleaner. We deposit our liquid waste, right? I think you might understand the concept of number 1 and number 2. Yes. So the number 1, the liquid waste, the P, it goes into a funnel, and we keep all of our urine separate. And then the solid waste goes into a different container. It's its own contained little bag, and like a little plastic bag. And you never touch it. You might see it a little bit, and you just move it, and it stays into a big metal container. What we do with the urine is really important because water is so expensive. We recycle it. We take all the water out of the urine and are left with this salty, yucky brine. We never touch it. But then we take all the water out of the urine, we purify it, we pasteurize it, we distill it, and then it turns into pure water. And then we use that water for things like making air, H2O, right? We add electricity, we get the oxygen out. We use it for drinking. And yes, so some days you're drinking yesterday's coffee and today's coffee.
Amazing, isn't it? What you can do with it. Brilliant. Recycle. Okay.
Question number 2. Do you get hot? What is the temperature?
Yes, we have inside the space station, the International Space Station, it is the same temperature the whole time. I don't know, somewhere around 24 C, which is 73 or 74 degrees Fahrenheit. And so it's a nice temperature the whole time. In fact, it's so boring because it's never hot, it's never cold, it's never rainy. It's always the same. But that's because of fine aerospace engineering. Because outside the space station, like I mentioned before, it gets up to 400 degrees when you're inside the sunlight, and 45 minutes later you're in the dark and it gets negative 200 or 300 degrees. So the outside the temperature is changing quite a bit. Inside it isn't, and that's what makes designing a spacesuit really tricky, is that you're inside your own little space station.
And the whole time you're flying at 17,000 miles an hour.
17,500 miles an hour, yes. We go around the planet Earth, every 90 minutes, and we can see some amazing things.
Question number 3. When you took your first spacewalk, did it make you feel as if you were taking a giant stride into a pool? And how did it make you?
Yes, spacewalks. Not every astronaut gets to do them, so I was very lucky to be able to do 9 spacewalks. In fact, my first 6 spacewalks were in a Russian spacesuit. It turns out that in university I studied Russian language, and it turned out that was very useful. And because I can speak Russian pretty well, they allowed me to go outside in their spacesuits as well as fly in their spacecraft. So then I also did American spacewalks in American spacesuits, and they're similar and yet different. But the first one was in Russian spacesuit, and I guess like the first time you take a scuba dive, you know, in your gear and everything like that, you're either on the side of the boat or on the pool, and you take your first stride. For us, it's a much more controlled thing, but it was equally exciting as we open the hatch and climb outside the door and look down, 250 miles below, and say, oh my goodness, I'm I'm around planet Earth going 17,500 miles an hour. And at first your hands say, I don't want to let go because you think you're going to fall, but of course you're not going to fall. But it's still one of those reflexes you have, and you have to convince yourself, no, this is okay, this is normal, just go and do your business. And we did. So every spacewalk is very exciting, but there's something always special about the first.
Question 4. What speed does the International Space Station travel at?
Yes, 17,500 miles an hour. And that's an important number because the rockets have to get up to that speed, because that defines how far above Earth we go. If we decide to add a little extra rocket on the back of the space station and go faster, our altitude will go higher, because it's one big thing. And if you keep adding a little bit of energy, you're going to go higher and higher, and eventually you'll get to the moon. And so, but we stay really low, right above the Earth's atmosphere, That way, it costs less energy to send up all of our resupplies. Our resupplies, important things like food and water and clothing and scientific experiments. So 17,500 miles an hour is a really important number. And I think that turns out to be about 28,000 kilometers per hour. So I know, Ian, maybe Gemma, you drive very fast on the motorway.
No,
You
no,
can't go that fast.
no. If there's any police watching this, it's all no.
Well, they should try to catch us someday, eh?
They'll be there with a camera.
Question number 4. Is it true that the Earth looks mainly blue from space?
Yes. It's an interesting blue though. When we fly, because the blue comes, I guess, from the sunlight through the atmosphere, and but when we are up in space, the light actually has to go from the sun through the atmosphere once and then back up to us through the atmosphere so we could see it. So it ends up to be more of a blue gray instead of a pale blue. It's more of a blue gray. But most of our planet is covered by water. I mean, most being 70-something%, and so we're most of our orbit for International Space Station is over water, and it does make us wonder, why we know so much about other planets and not everything yet about our planet Earth. So more scuba divers out there, we will learn more about our own planet ourselves.
Which country looks the biggest from space?
Now, I'm talking to you from Texas, one of the largest states in the United States. And I think my Texan friends are supposed to say Texas is the biggest country from space. But I have to explain to them that Texas is not a country. So the beauty of it is, honestly, honey, is that when you're in space, that you look at the Earth, and it's not like a globe. There are no lines, there's no country names, there's no borders. So you don't know what country you're over unless you know geography pretty well, and you can guess, right? You can always tell when you're at the tip of South America or flying over India. And of course, the UK is quite beautiful from space. A lot of clouds, though, always a lot of clouds. But you really don't know. So you don't. So we just look at it, and we just have kind of one planet that all human beings live on. And without seeing the borders, we can say, it makes us wonder when we're up there why we fight so much down here.
I saw on another interview you made a while ago that you saw your parents' house, or roughly where they are.
Yes, I did fly over my hometown, and it was at night, and so I couldn't see my parents' house, but I could tell where they, because we live along a river in the state of Pennsylvania, the city of Pittsburgh. I could tell approximately where they were. I couldn't see the individual house.
Yeah.
But I was talking to my father on the phone, and he could look up and see me, and I could look down. I couldn't see him.
Awesome.
But it was. I felt very close to my father. I always do, but especially at that moment.
Yeah.
Do you get scared in space?
Aha. Another reason why scuba is really important, because scuba is it's a safe occupation. It's a safe thing to do. But it is a little bit scary. And if you can overcome your fears of being underwater and learning to enjoy the experience, that's the same kind of process that we have in flying in space. And that's what's really beautiful about it, is that it is a scary thing. But I don't think I was scared ever. I really don't, just because it was such a wonderful, amazing experience. Surreal to be in the International Space Station, surreal to be outside. And I couldn't believe it was happening to me. But no, maybe I'm not smart enough to be scared. But it wasn't scary. It was just exciting.
Oh, brilliant.
Question 7. What is taking off in a rocket really like?
So I've taken off in 2 different rockets. One was a Russian Soyuz, and the other one was American Space Shuttle. And next year, maybe about this time, maybe a little bit sooner, I'll be taking off in a 3rd rocket on a different spaceship, and it's really exciting that you're sitting there. You say, I can't believe it's finally here, the day, and they count down 3, 2, 1, blast off. And for me, it's more of an emotional experience than a physical experience. Of course, you're starting at 0 miles an hour, and you're going to end up at 17,500 miles an hour, and it all takes about 10 minutes. The Russian Soyuz took 9. The American Space Shuttle took 8.5. My new rocket's going to take 10 or 11 minutes. But eventually, it all happens very quickly. Along the way, you feel some G-force. In other words, you're accelerating, and it pushes you back in your seat. Just like when Ian drives, I'm sure he hits the accelerator. So we go. We get to about 3.5 Gs. I come from a military airplane background where we get to 9 Gs flying in an F-16. So 3 Gs, it's okay, but it's not that exciting. But being inside of on top of a rocket and accelerating, going into space is super exciting. So it's more of a happy feeling than anything else.
Brilliant.
I've already forgotten my question. But have you ever seen a nebula?
Oh, I know what nebulas are. They're they're like gas clouds when stars explode, for example, and they're quite beautiful, colorful. And but we don't see them in space. I think when you watch the movies and things like that, they show those things because they want to make it even more exciting.
Yeah, so you can't see them in space.
Well, you could if you had a telescope. See, the thing is, Ian, they're like millions and millions and billions of kilometers, miles away, and we're only like 300 miles closer to them on top. So they're not going to be. No, the one thing we don't have is atmospheric blur, right? Because the atmosphere makes things a lot more blurrier, and that's why things like the Hubble Space Telescope can see things a lot better, just because there's no atmosphere. But it's not because we're that much closer. So if we had a telescope up in space, but most of our windows on the space station are pointed down and not up, because we're always looking. We're fascinated by planet Earth. So if I had a telescope in space and I wanted to look at a nebula, you could look along Orion's belt. There's the Orion Nebula. That's always a good one to see. But I've never seen one in space.
What was it like being on a Star Trek?
Haha. Yes. It's really interesting, the people that you get to meet when you're an astronaut, and honestly, I'm very fascinated by meeting you three today. It's because there's so many interesting people out there. So I happened to meet the actor who plays Jonathan Archer, which is a Enterprise, one of the Enterprise captains. Captain Archer, played by Scott Bakula, and I went and saw the set and how they did things. And for me, it was fascinating because it was equally complex to make a TV show or even a movie that makes people believe that it's real than it is to actually make things that are real. So at NASA, we do it for real. And if you ever were to come inside of one of my spaceships, one of the first things I would tell you, besides being nice and saying welcome, we're glad you're here, but the next thing would be don't touch anything, because all the buttons are real, and they could affect things, like the one might take away your oxygen or something like that, right? You don't want to do that. But those on set, you could touch whatever buttons you want because they were all fake.
Yeah.
Everything that they did was just it was just the magic to make it look real, but it was not. It was all fake, and that's what I came back with appreciation for what we do at NASA and what we do with the world space programs. Said what we do is something is really tough and it's real. We're really up there. We're really doing things, and it costs a lot of money and it costs a lot of effort, but it's something worthwhile that human beings should be doing. Of course, I love watching a good movie or TV show, and it inspires us to do the real things in space.
That must be amazing to see, the things that you've seen, and also, to do the things that you've done. It's brilliant that NASA does that. It's great. Also, what we want to do as well, just say thank you to our lovely patrons who help support and make our podcasts happen. And on behalf of our patrons, our friend John has asked us a question to ask you, and that would be, we'd like to know how close diving is to actual weightlessness.
Well, a big hello to John, and would like to say that it is quite similar. I already mentioned one of the differences, right? Everything is the same. And all the maneuvers that we do when we're practicing our spacewalks underwater are very similar. I mean, they're quite applicable to when we're in space. There's nothing better outside of really doing it than what we have set up at the Neutral Buoyancy Laboratory. It's quite amazing. The Russians have a similar setup, by the way, called the Hydra Lab. I've dived there too, but it's quite similar except the temperature difference, and that's something we can't model. The divers would not be happy about that. All of a sudden we're going to cold, now we're going to get hot, now we're going to get cold. So that wouldn't work out very well. And another difference is there is a water resistance. So as I move along in the pool, I'm fighting against the resistance of the water. So I calibrate my muscles to go at a certain strength. And you can always tell a first-time spacewalker as they're out there, because all of a sudden they're going too fast because there's no resistance.
Yeah.
But we learn how to adapt, and you can see after the first hour or so, everybody's moving along at a very energy efficient pace, because you're out there for 7 hours, no food. We do have a little drink bag in there that we can drink a little bit of water, and that's it. So we have to shepherd our energy, and those of us with a lot of experience, you learn how to be very efficient and very fast without having to move super fast.
Yeah, we've got a super great friend of the podcast called Christina Zanato. She's a shark behaviourist, an ocean and cave explorer, and she has asked us to ask you a question. Which is the one message you want to be remembered by?
Well, hello to Christina, and thank you for your support. And one of the and I've lived in caves and done cave exploring too, and we just have such a wonderful, beautiful planet. So my message that I don't know if I'd be remembered by, it sounds like I'm going away. No, I'm not. I'm going up on the space station, but that's not that far away. But is that as human beings, we really should be nice to each other. We should get along. We should focus our efforts to be constructive and not destructive. We have a whole universe to explore. I think Christina knows this, and anybody who's been underwater, we know that this Earth is just magnificent. So we don't need to be fighting over little parcels of land and philosophies. We should just be exploring what we have here on this planet and the rest of the solar system together.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And should we go on to the
Yeah.
So we ask all our guests set questions, okay, and that kind of brings us towards the end of the podcast, and we'd like to see what you think. But we've tailored these questions for more outer space type environment, okay. You've seen the Earth from space from all angles. Have you picked out your next dive site?
This is such a good such a good question, because you understand us very well. Because when we're up there, that's what we're doing. We're looking down at planet Earth. We're seeing all these amazing places. For example, I've never been south of the equator. I mean, I've flown over it. You can count how many times, 16 times a day, times 381 days. Thousands and thousands of times. But my feet have never touched south of the equator. So. And when we're up there, we're actually looking at places to go explore and maybe share with our families and things like that. So what I think I would like to do, my next dive location would be somewhere south of the equator. Maybe Australia and the Great Barrier Reef, somewhere off of New Zealand. And there's some amazing small islands in the Atlantic Ocean that are south of the equator that are, kind of halfway between South America and Africa, that just little blot of land out there. And it's like, wow, talk about being so far away in the middle of nowhere. I think they're farther away than we are a lot of times aboard the space station. So I think one of those places would be great to take my family and to explore the ocean together.
That's great. Right, do you want to ask?
When you were up in the space, do you ever think about other forms of life?
Yeah, we wonder, right? This is a great philosophical debate, and we always wonder, right? Are there other people out there? Are there other aliens, creatures, and what are they like? And that's why we should go explore the universe, because it is so big, and we are so small on this planet, and we're like little kids squabbling over things here when we can go explore and see what that other life is like. And are they based on DNA, or how do they reproduce? Do they build great cities? Do they have technology that can help us? Do we have technology that can help them? And it would be great to know. But space is so big. We have a lot of engineering problems to learn how to travel in great distances in a short amount of time. And we haven't figured those things out. So we can't even get to the moon. It takes 3 days to go to the moon. It takes 6 months to go to Mars, and Mars is really close. So we have a lot of things to learn. So maybe, honey, you can help us come up with a warp drive or something like that.
That's good. Could you name up to 3 people you would like to take to the International Space Station, past and present, and
So up to 3 people. See, the thing is that I have 3 children and a wife, and if I could just take my whole family with me, I don't think I'd ever come back, to be honest. We'd just stay up there, maybe build our own little starship. We use Honey's star drive and go explore the whole universe. That would be really fun. But if philosophically, if we could bring any world leader up there with us, and people who have political power, and then they take a look at our planet from space, there's that overview effect, and I think it affects everyone. And then you realize that, hey, we are just one big, not happy always, but we're one big family of human beings on this planet, and we need to take good care of our planet.
We all have our favourite bits of dive equipment that we like to have with us all the time. But have you got one luxury that you always take with you into space?
Yes. One of the things to be on a long expedition is that you need to know yourself. You need to know what makes you grumpy, what makes you happy, so that you can integrate well with your teammates and enjoy the experience. So for me, I need to read. So I like to read science fiction. I like to read literature. I like to read. So if I did not have an electronic book with me up in space, some kind of book reader, it would be very difficult for me. I'd be a lot more grumpy. And so I think that having one of those, even if I go on a trip to a different country or anything, I still have a little book reader, whether it's on my telephone or a little Kindle reader or something like that. It's important. My very first mission, the NASA asked, well, we'll send up some books with you. How many would you like, 4 or 5? And I said, no, paper books, no. I'll be over within a week with 4 or 5 paper books. So I had to show NASA that there were these, back in the early 2000s, that there were these things called electronic books. And since then, they've been able to help everybody with movies and electronic books and things like that, to help us keep, to be able to have some downtime, so that during the day when we are on our mission and doing well, that we will be at our best.
And that was a revelation hearing about the Kindles. I'm sure.
I'm sorry?
I'm sure it's a revelation hearing about a Kindle for NASA.
Oh yes, boy, that was it's funny. We helped invent the technology, but then we have to explain it to the agency. There are these things that we helped invent that could help us up in space.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. If you could have a billboard that is in space that's so big to advertise planet Earth, whether it be a statement, an image, a question, a quote, but you want to get the message out there to the galaxy and beyond, what would you put on it?
Oh boy,
So
I have to make it
planet Earth.
something like, dear wonderful people of planet Earth, we have such a beautiful planet. Let's take good care of it and explore space together. But that sounds kind of cheesy, so I'd have to make it sound really awesome, like join the Space Corps and go and explore the universe, or
Space Force.
Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, I guess we got one of those now. But it's more of a something to say, hey, forget about your small problems and let's focus on working together, because it is amazing what the universe looks like. And that's what I think scuba is. Scuba is a way for us to learn and explore our planet even better. And those of you who out there in podcast land who've been under, you will know that what I'm talking about, to see new things, like my son's revelation that there's a kelp forest, or to my first time that I saw a lobster actually living under the sea. I always thought they lived in the fish tanks and those tanks inside the restaurant. So there's so many things to explore, and that's what scuba. You can become your own explorer. It's not that expensive. It's not that scary. And my hats are off to you for helping folks across the planet, especially in the UK, to get off their couches, to get out of their gardens and go explore.
Get involved.
Yeah, have fun as well. That's the main thing.
Yeah.
That's good.
So earlier we just touched on films. What is your favourite space film that you like to watch?
There are a lot of good ones out there, and I can't say I have a favorite, but I will share one that I really liked. And one of the ones I really liked was it was called The Martian, right? It was about this guy who got stuck on planet Mars, right? And he figured out how to come back, and he ate potatoes and things like that.
He used his poo.
I'm sorry?
He used his poo, didn't he,
Yes,
for
yes,
the
he
potatoes?
did. It's a good fertilizer, apparently. But it showed human ingenuity. I like that movie, but the real reason I can point out a few technical flaws, but that's what we astronauts do. But on the other hand, what I liked it was I watched it with my family, and I think for the very first time, my children actually understood the kind of thing that I do. They didn't really realize that when I go to the office that I'm doing all of these other things, and I felt bad. Maybe I wasn't sharing with them, or maybe they just didn't. They're just young. They didn't have the exposure. So I think that movie, that film, The Martian, gave my children things to think about and made them want to go explore and to investigate things and to study science and maths and engineering and just learning more about the world around them. And so my hat's off to the folks that make that movie and other movies that inspire us to be better people and to go find out more about the universe around us.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And just sort of on the film or the media side, do you have a favourite space song?
Yes. One that we did for our last shuttle mission was on STS-134, and it was the last time that Endeavour flew, and it became kind of our crew theme song called The Final Countdown.
Oh, really? For Europe?
Yeah, it was electronica from the, I guess, 1980s. The band was Europa.
Yeah.
It's very catchy. So that's one of my favorites. But I also like the one where it talks about it gives a countdown, just like Honey did it to start off the show. 4, 3, 2, 1. Earth below us, drifting, falling, floating, weightless, calling, calling home. And I think that's a beautiful song to think about, because it is beautiful to float weightless. And even though I love being in space, I've spent over a year of my life there. There's no place like coming home.
Yeah, that's true. Should we go?
Christina?
Yeah.
So obviously Christina gave us a couple of other questions, which we may have touched on slightly before. But she said, what is the one thing you have observed from space that has made you realise the importance of protecting our planet? One thing that I knew scientifically, and I had studied it at university, but I didn't really appreciate it till I saw it with my own eyes. And we have an atmosphere around Earth, and that's good because that's what we breathe. We look up and we think the atmosphere goes forever. But when you're flying above planet Earth, you can see that the atmosphere is so thin compared to the rest of the planet. It is really incredibly thin. And if we don't take care of our atmosphere, then we're not going to be able to breathe very well. And you can keep as many nitrox tanks at home as you want, but that's not going to last you super long if your atmosphere is polluted. So there's things that really you could see from space, and you can also see some ocean pollution and things like that. So we really need to take care of our planet. And the thing that got me though was how thin our atmosphere is and how delicate balance that we're on. And when you're down here, it's really hard to see that.
Yeah. And what does exploration mean to you?
Yeah, exploration is I think really important for human beings to do. In fact, I think that's one of the reasons why we're here, is to use our brilliant big brains to understand the universe around us. And the more we understand the universe around us, the better we can make our lives here on planet Earth. For example, we figured out this thing called electricity, and this great British scientist, James Clerk Maxwell, figured out the Maxwell equations, which gave us, things like radio and television and things like that. But electricity helps us to conquer the night. We don't have to go to bed when it turns dark and get up as soon as the sun comes up. We have so many things and people would say that life is better on planet Earth because of electricity. So the more we explore, the more things that we learn about our universe, the better off we make life here on planet Earth. And that's what exploration means to me. Well, next time I find myself in the UK, I'd love to stop by and visit and say hello. And when do you think this podcast may make airing? Because I'll subscribe to your to the podcast and listen to on my way as I drive into the NBL and get ready to do my dives.
Awesome.
Hopefully by the end of the week.
Super. I look forward to it. And it was quite a pleasure to meet you. I hope our paths cross again. And who knows, maybe we'll see you all in space someday.
Hopefully.
Yeah, you'll see Honey. Yeah.
Well, after she invents the warp drive, she's going to be rich and famous.
I'll be on that.
But thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, Mike, for joining us. And it's been brilliant. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you. Hopefully see you again.
Bye.
Far away, and I'll play the fool.
There we go. So thank you very much, Mike. That was brilliant. What do you think?
Amazing.
Yeah? Did you enjoy that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was. And learned loads, and it's really great. I thought how the space actually ties in with scuba diving
Very
all
much
the
so.
way through. You know,
Yeah.
right from the training and his thoughts of when he'd spacewalking. You know,
Yeah.
just absolutely brilliant.
All the words he said, it just rang through with scuba training.
Yeah.
And the fears and the
And I thought that was really good how he could actually relate when he looks at the world. You know, he's in a fortunate position where there's only a handful of people who have actually gone out the globe and looked back and
can
gone.
look down
And you can
and
actually
see
think, well, you're thinking about conservation. You're thinking about how man affects the world and our impact on the globe and animals and everything. So that was brilliant.
Yeah, and just
Really
the fact
good.
that he's seeing the ozone layer, the impact it's having on us.
And how thin it is. Yeah.
Pretty shocking and sobering.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, brilliant. And we're hoping to get back in touch with Mike in the new year, which will probably be after he's been up on the Starliner, because I imagine his schedule's going to start getting really, really busy, I would have thought.
Yeah, so we're watching him with interest now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So that'd be really good. Anyway, thank you to everyone who's been involved. So first off, thank you to NASA for allowing him to join us for an hour. That was really great. Thank you very much. Most appreciated. And also thank you to Mike for agreeing to come on.
Yeah.
Thank you. So that's brilliant. Thank you to John for helping to organise it, who's our main contact at NASA. Thank you. And also,
thank you for the contributions from primary school.
Yeah, hello to everybody at St Edmunds. Thank you for your questions. That's brilliant. Thank you to John for yours, and thank you to Christina Sonato for your questions as well. That was brilliant. So, if you do get a chance, we'll put all the links on the blurb that follows the podcast and the episode. This will be out on the usual places. Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, YouTube, Libsyn, and you'll be able to find this. It'll be all on social media. All right. So thank you very much for everybody. And if you've got any questions following this, do write in, and we'll do our best to answer them. Okay. So any questions and any feedback and comments?
Yeah, and it's been nice having Scuba Honey.
It has. Okay. Thanks for joining us.
Join us again.
I
See
will.
you.
See you again soon. Keep
Okay.
watching and don't forget to subscribe. See you soon.
Bye.